I had spent 2 years working in Begum Sahiba's house. During that time, both Begum Sahiba and Sahib Ji had proven to be exceptionally kind. They took remarkable care of their employees and never hesitated to ask about my every need. As long as Sahib Ji was alive, Begum Sahiba seemed to embrace life's little joys with a quiet dignity. Despite the inevitable passage of time, the charm on her face never waned. She was so beautiful that every time I looked at her, I found myself blinking in awe. Often, I would tease her, remarking in jest that Sahib Ji must have married her while utterly enamored by her beauty, since even after all these years, his eyes could never stray far from her. Begum Sahiba, what is it that you eat that causes your beauty to grow with each passing day? I would ask playfully. In response, she would blush, lower her head in modesty, and gently scold me before dismissing my remarks. Begum Sahiba had no children of her own. Whenever she saw another woman doting on her children or heard someone speak of a mother's love, a profound sadness would overtake her. Her eyes would fill with deep sorrow, and in those moments, my heart overflowed with compassion for her. They had everything: a comfortable home, a generous fortune, and a reservoir of love. Yet one thing was missing: the blessing of a child. I often thought that if God had granted them a child, perhaps this lingering pain in Begum Sahiba's heart would have been soothed. Then one day, everything changed when Sahib Ji suddenly left this world. With his departure, Begum Sahiba was left utterly alone. She would weep ceaselessly and over the phone implore Salman to return. "Now come back," she would say. "Since you left, I have been consumed by such sorrow and worry for you. Now even your uncle is no longer with us, and you have no idea how alone I have become." Hearing her voice tremble with loneliness and desperation, I could not help but be struck by the mystery of this Salman. Who was he, and what connection did he share with Begum Sahiba that inspired such tender affection? One day, when I finally gathered the courage to ask, Begum Sahiba confided in me. Salman was the son of her brother-in-law. His father and his mother had perished in a terrible road accident. Salman was only 14 when Begum Sahiba and Sahib Ji had taken him into their home, raising him as though he were their own son and sparing no effort in fulfilling his every wish. Yet despite all their care, Salman, whether by fate or by his own nature, never developed the warmth or affection one might expect toward these kind souls. Perhaps it was because, in his young eyes, the woman who had raised him did not mirror the ideal of a mother. From the very start, his own mother had sown seeds of discontent in his heart against Begum Sahiba. She would lament that Sahib Ji, despite his wealth, had given only a meager sum to his own brother. Such remarks, repeated over time, had taken root in Salman's heart, causing him to harbor an unyielding hatred toward his uncle, a sentiment that in no small measure even countered the affection he should have felt. It is said that a child absorbs every word spoken by his parents. The prejudices and resentments they voice become etched into his soul. No matter how much one might try, a child cannot learn to love those who are despised by the very people who raised him. Perhaps influenced by his mother's bitter disdain, Salman's heart turned cold and embittered toward those who had cared for him. When Salman cleared his FSC examinations, he declared his decision with a determined finality. He would go to America to study medicine. "I can no longer remain here," he proclaimed. Begum Sahiba and Sahib Ji pleaded with him, promising that they would secure his admission anywhere he desired if he only stayed. However, Salman's mind was set, and so he departed, leaving his beloved caretakers in a state of deep sorrow. For the next 10 years, he made America his home. He completed his education there, secured a job, and built a life far away from the warm halls of Begum Sahiba's residence. Yet, as time passed, Begum Sahiba's loneliness became almost palpable. Every tear that rolled down her face, every wistful word spoken over the telephone, was a constant reminder of the emptiness in her life. Her heartfelt pleas for Salman to return grew more insistent with each passing day. And eventually, moved by her persistent sorrow, Salman consented to come back. That day, Begum Sahiba's joy seemed boundless, as though she had been granted the promise of a new beginning. I had never before heard anyone speak of Salman with such happiness. Deep within my heart, however, I couldn't understand how anyone could harbor such animosity toward a gentle, kind woman like Begum Sahiba. When Salman finally appeared before us, I soon discerned a different truth. He was not the compassionate son she had once known. Instead, I found him to be excessively self-absorbed and arrogant. Undeniably handsome, and possessing the uncanny ability to make any girl's heart flutter, Salman carried an air of confidence that bordered on conceit. I, however, was well aware of my own place in the world and remained steadfast in my loyalty to my fiancé, whom I loved with all my heart. I knew that men like Salman, sons of wealth and privilege, could only indulge in superficial diversions with poor girls like me. They might spend fleeting moments in our company, but they would never allow themselves to be truly bound by genuine affection. There were countless examples that had crossed my mind of men who had ruined the lives of women, tainting their honor and defaming them in the process. When it came time for commitment, these men would dismiss any notion of loyalty, reminding the women of the vast chasm that separated their worlds. Our status is worlds apart, they would say, so live in your own little sphere and dream your dreams. In doing so, they would quickly forget that they were once the very ones who had filled those same eyes with hopeful visions. On the day Salman returned home, Begum Sahiba had ordered me to prepare a variety of dishes, unsure whether his tastes had remained unchanged over the years. As she laid out an assortment of meals before him, Salman accepted a modest portion with a haughty tilt of his head, as though he were repaying Begum Sahiba's generosity with reluctant gratitude. Then his gaze shifted and lingered on me. For a moment, his look held an unmistakable surprise. When Begum Sahiba introduced me to him, his eyes betrayed an astonished glimmer as he muttered under his breath, "Who would have thought that a maid could be so beautiful?" From that day onward, every time my eyes inadvertently met his, I saw him furtively glancing my way with an almost predatory squint. Each glance filled me with a sense of repulsion. I felt dismayed that he had now become one of those people I profoundly disliked. While Begum Sahiba conversed with him in warm, affectionate tones, he maintained a cool indifference that chilled me to the bone. Over the past few days, my elder sister's health had taken a steep decline. With a child soon to be born, she was all alone in her home, desperately in need of a companion. In those moments, only a woman's presence could provide the care she required. There was no one else, for apart from my mother, no other woman was available to tend to her needs. Since Begum Sahiba also needed my assistance, I had not been able to accompany my mother. My mother, unwilling to leave me alone in an empty house, had insisted that I stay behind, for our small family was the only company we had ever known. I recalled how my father had passed away during my childhood, leaving my mother and me to fend for ourselves. Consequently, we had been forced into servitude in other households. I count myself fortunate, for I had been nurtured by kind souls who spared me the harshest struggles of life. When I confided my own troubles to Begum Sahiba, she replied with a gentle firmness, "This is a grand house. Come, you may reside wherever you wish. Who are we to deny you?" Trusting her heartfelt words, I moved into the room adjacent to hers. However, when Salman learned of this arrangement, he fixed his gaze on me with such an odd expression that I could almost decipher its meaning. That look sent a chill down my spine and filled me with dread. For the first time, I felt as though my dignity was under threat. I was not a fragile, timid girl to be cowed by the advances of another, nor would I let myself be manipulated by someone who underestimated me. I prided myself on overcoming the constraints of poverty. I had never allowed my modest beginnings to define my strength or resolve. It was this determination that enabled me to ignore Salman's increasingly provocative behavior. Yet, he began to harass me relentlessly, as if he could not fathom that a mere maid might stand her ground with such conviction. One day, as I was busy preparing meals in the kitchen, I suddenly heard a noise behind me, a shuffle that turned my head sharply. There, standing in the middle of the doorway, was Salman. His eyes burned with a strange, almost lustful intensity as they fixed upon me. In that instant, my heart pounded furiously, and I struggled to regain control of my composure. Had I faltered even for a moment, I knew he would have overpowered me. Without warning, he strode forward and grasped my hand. The gesture, far more invasive than I had anticipated, provoked an immediate reaction from me. With a swift pull, I retracted my hand and scolded him sharply. "You should be ashamed of yourself for doing this." Yet he appeared utterly unmoved by my rebuke. In his own mind, raised in the liberating environment of America, such behavior must have seemed entirely ordinary. Then, with an unexpected shift in tone, he remarked, "You are nothing but an ordinary maid. yet you carry yourself with such unwarranted pride. But do not worry, I am not asking this from you for free. I am willing to give you whatever price you demand. I know girls like you all too well." His words sent a jolt through me, and before I could stop myself, my hand rose involuntarily, leaving a mark upon his cheek. At that very moment, Begum Sahiba entered the room. The sight of the two of us together left her visibly astonished, and even Salman appeared unsettled by her sudden presence. Seizing the opportunity, he quickly concocted an excuse, claiming, "I have an insatiable craving for coffee." Begum Sahiba's face softened with a smile as she responded, "Had you told me sooner, I would have prepared the finest coffee. Your uncle always cherished the coffee made by my own hands." With that, "Bad," she set about preparing the coffee, while Salman, his gaze still burning with an unsettling intensity, left the room. I was left trembling, haunted by the realization that I had, perhaps inadvertently, allowed my emotions to betray me. I wondered what the consequences of that moment might be, and from that day forward, I became even more vigilant and cautious. Over the following days, the atmosphere in the household grew heavy with unspoken tension. There were moments when the soft clink of dishes in the kitchen was drowned by the echo of silent worries. I would catch myself lost in thought, recalling the gentle warmth of Begum Sahiba's smile, which had once been a beacon of hope in an otherwise lonely existence. In quiet moments, I reflected on the stark contrasts of our lives, a life where even the smallest joys were treasured, yet shadowed by an undercurrent of sorrow and regret. The home, which had once resonated with the sounds of laughter and familial love, now bore the silent imprints of loss and unfulfilled dreams. I found myself wondering about the true cost of pride and bitterness as each day seemed to unravel another layer of quiet despair. One misty morning, as the first light of dawn struggled to filter through the curtains, I went to Begum Sahiba's room to serve her breakfast. To my shock, I found her in a deep, uncharacteristic sleep. Never before had I seen her so sound. She was always an early riser, up with the Fajr prayer, and in the mornings she relished a cup of tea on an empty stomach. But now she slept so profoundly that I had to shake her gently to rouse her. Her state was so far removed from her usual self that I could not help but worry about her health. When she finally awoke, her head spun uncontrollably, and the disorientation was evident on her face. Throughout that day, and then repeatedly over the next few days, Begum Sahiba continued to appear listless and frail. Each day, her weakness deepened, and the duration of her sleep lengthened, signs that something was gravely amiss. I was left astonished, wondering what was happening to Begum Sahiba. Day by day, she was growing weaker, and the duration of her sleep was increasing. All day long, she wore a look of despondency and helplessness. It seemed as though a heavy gloom had settled over her spirit, and even her physical health was beginning to falter. My mother had gone to stay with her sister for a few days, hoping that a change of scenery would help her recover. However, just yesterday, she called me with news that she would remain there for at least another couple of months. Her sister's baby was extremely frail, and both mother and baby needed round-the-clock care. Meanwhile, I was tormented here by Salman's behavior, and deep down I wished with every fiber of my being that mother would return as soon as possible. She had reassured me that Madame, the kindly, gentle lady taking care of us, was exceptionally good to me, treating me like a daughter. According to mother, there would be no trouble here under her watchful care. Every night, as was my habit, I would secure my bedroom door from the inside before going to sleep. Yet, despite my precautions, there were moments in the quiet hours when I felt an eerie presence. At times, I sensed someone attempting to pry the door open. On other occasions, a gentle but insistent tapping at the window would reach my ears. In those moments of solitary vulnerability, it became unmistakably clear. There was someone trying to intrude into my sanctuary, and I knew full well that it could only be Salman. Salman was a man of conflicting passions. On one hand, his heart harbored a lustful desire for me, a dangerous attraction that filled him with a selfish yearning. On the other hand, beneath that carnal desire simmered a thirst for vengeance. He was restless, constantly biding his time for the chance when we might be alone together. It was then, he believed, that he could finally exact the retribution he so fervently desired. I, however, was determined to never grant him that opportunity. I could not allow him even a moment's chance to hurt me further. Amid all of this, Madame remained blissfully unaware. Despite my many attempts and the overwhelming urge to confide in her, I found myself unable to reveal the truth about Salman's erratic behavior. Madame had always held Salman in high esteem. She believed him to be the epitome of innocence and simplicity, a man beyond reproach. In her eyes, there was no one in the world quite as pure or straightforward as Salman. Over time, even his attitude toward her had noticeably shifted. He had begun speaking to her with gentle courtesy, spending more time in her company, and even occasionally escorting her on outings. Yet rather than bask in this newfound attention, Madame's demeanor grew increasingly pensive and troubled. Day after day, I observed her lost in a reverie, as if burdened by thoughts too painful to share. Finally, one day, the sight of her deep distress compelled me to speak. With trembling concern, I asked, "What troubles you so, Madame? Why do you seem so burdened?" After a long pause, she began, her voice heavy with emotion. "When children are young, it is imperative that their parents devote themselves to nurturing and guiding them. Without this care, the risk of a child's moral decay is all too great. I fear that Salman, too, has lost his way. In his early years, neither his brother nor his sister-in-law gave him the attention he needed. Instead, they entangled him in endless family intrigues, leaving little room for true nurturing. Then, in his adolescence, he stubbornly chose to uproot himself and move to a faraway land, a place like America, where the differences between sin and virtue seem blurred. It is no wonder that he has fallen prey to a life of waywardness, showing scant respect for the bonds of family or tradition." Tears welled in her eyes as she confessed these thoughts, her voice trembling with sorrow and regret. I did not quite understand why Madame voiced such harsh judgments, but the profound worry etched on her face spoke volumes. In recent days, her physical condition had worsened dramatically. The food she managed to consume was swiftly rejected in fits of vomiting, and she was plagued by dizzy spells and an overwhelming sense of weakness. Witnessing her fragile state filled me with dread. I feared that her illness might worsen to the point where she, like our late Mr. Sahib, might quietly depart this world without a final goodbye. In my concern, I resolved to take Madame to the hospital, even if it meant insisting against her protests. Once there, however, the doctor's words left both Madame and me in stunned disbelief. After conducting a thorough examination, he spoke in a measured tone. "There is nothing mistaken in my findings. The truth is this: you are indeed frail, and despite the grace bestowed upon you at this age, you must take utmost care of your health. Consider yourself fortunate that you have reached this stage of life with Allah's blessing." His words were intended to comfort, but the matter was far too bitter for Madame to accept without a tremor of shock. With her eyes wide in astonishment, she implored, "You must not let anyone hear of this misunderstanding. Surely you cannot be serious. After all, it has been over 6 months since your husband passed away. It is unthinkable that this could be so." I tried to console her, suggesting perhaps the reports might have been misinterpreted or that there was some error in the tests. Yet the seed of doubt had been sown, and that night, as I lay awake, an intense thirst startled me into waking up at the dead of night. It was around midnight when I remembered I had neglected to keep water in my room, a lapse that forced me to leave the safety of my locked sanctuary and venture toward the kitchen. I dreaded every step, for leaving the room unsettled me deeply, not only because of my habit of secure confinement, but also because I knew what awaited me outside. I had always been terrified of Salman. I trusted him not in the slightest. But that night, driven by an overwhelming need to quench my thirst, I had no choice. As I stepped out, my eyes caught sight of Salman approaching Madame's room. I paused in shock. His appearance was disheveled, and a look of disgrace washed over his features. What struck me most was the sight of a bottle of alcohol clutched in his hand. I could hardly believe what I was witnessing. How could it be that Salman, whom Madame revered so dearly, would be seen skulking around her room in the dead of night with a bottle of liquor in hand? The very image left me breathless and trembling, as if the floor had suddenly dropped out from beneath me. I peered cautiously into the room, my heart pounding as I took in the unbelievable scene before me. It was as if my entire world had been upended in a single moment. I could not reconcile the image of the man I once thought innocent with the actions unfolding before my eyes. How could Salman, the very person Madame had nurtured as one of her own, stoop to such ignominy? My mind raced with questions and despair. He had been raised with tender care, almost as if he were her own child, and now he was blatantly disrespecting the only woman who had ever shown him true kindness. I could not bear the thought of his behavior any longer. At that moment, I finally understood why Madame had been so despondent lately. The next day, shaken to the core, I summoned every bit of courage I had and confessed everything to Madame. I told her about the strange noises at night, the sensation of someone trying to open my door, and most damning of all, what I had seen. Salmon slinking toward her room with an alcohol bottle in hand. Madame listened in stunned silence. As the gravity of my words sank in, her disbelief was palpable. Then, with trembling resolve, she revealed something I had never known. Every night, she said quietly, Salman comes by with a glass of milk and a pill. He tells me that it is a vitamin tablet meant to keep my health in check. I have always trusted him, accepting it in my gratitude for his kindness. I never questioned the nature of the pill. Her eyes filled with tears as she continued. But now I see that I was wrong. The tablet is not a vitamin, it is a sleeping pill. It is the reason I have been drifting in and out of consciousness, unaware of what truly happens in these dark hours. Her confession sent a chill down my spine. I remembered that fateful night when, as Salman handed her the pill, she had hesitated only for an instant before, as if in protest, spitting it out as soon as his hand had touched her. It was as though her inner strength had woken up in a flash of clarity, and in that moment she signaled to him that she had already taken her medicine for the day. Yet the damage had been done. That same midnight, following his routine visit, Salman once again entered Madame's room. As soon as his hand brushed against her, something inside her snapped. Without warning, Madame's eyes flew open in a sudden burst of anger and despair. In that instant, she began to lash out, her face contorted with fury as she struck Salman repeatedly. "How dare you!" she cried, her voice filled with both sorrow and rage. "All my life I have lived with dignity. I have never allowed anyone to speak ill of my character, nor have I ever demeaned myself in any way, and yet, because of you, my honor has been sullied. I can no longer look at myself in the mirror, burdened by the stain you have left on my reputation." The confrontation escalated quickly. After that agonizing night, Madame's distress deepened even further. Her health deteriorated so drastically that one day she became gravely ill. Desperate, I once again took her to see a doctor. With a heavy heart, I listened as the doctor, in a tone that was both apologetic and resigned, explained the devastating news. "I am sorry to inform you that the child was lost even before being born." The words struck us like a sledgehammer. For Madame, who had longed for a child with every ounce of her being, this news was paradoxically both a relief and a tragedy. She whispered fervent thanks to God, thanking him that the potential disgrace had been averted before it could ever mar her life. For she had spent her entire life yearning for the joy that a child would bring, and had feared that even if that joy were to arrive in her later years, society would only meet it with ridicule and scorn. In a final act of retribution, Madame had cast Salman out of the house and even disinherited him. The severity of his transgressions, in her eyes, warranted a complete severing of ties. Faced with this harsh judgment, Salman eventually came to realize the gravity of his actions. With humility, he approached Madame and pleaded for forgiveness, begging her not to strip him of his rightful share in her estate. But Madame's resolve was unyielding. "For a man as contemptible as you," she declared firmly, "the only punishment you deserve is a life devoid of any familial connection or support." In the aftermath of these events, Madame had decided to dedicate her property to the benefit of underprivileged children, a charitable act that reflected her enduring compassion despite the personal betrayals she had suffered. Life, however, continued to take unexpected turns. Soon after these tumultuous episodes, I was married. At Madame's insistence, my husband and I moved into the servant quarters of her home. Although my husband rented his own space, this arrangement had the unanticipated advantage of resolving our housing difficulties. With only Madame and me residing there, I no longer felt the constant, nagging unease that had once plagued me. In a way, our new living situation restored a semblance of peace and safety. Madame, too, found comfort in the new arrangement. My husband, a man of remarkable fortitude and unwavering responsibility, became a pillar of strength in our small household. Standing tall and with an unshakable demeanor, he took it upon himself to ensure that every corner of our home was secure. His presence allowed Madame to live without fear, and he was always mindful of the fact that Madame was not only our guest, but someone to be cherished and protected. His deep sense of duty and his respectful regard for her well-being never wavered. qualities that endeared him to Madame, who constantly praised him for his care and kindness. Yet, despite the relative calm that had finally settled over our home, there were moments when I could not help but gaze upon Madame's sorrowful face with a heavy heart. It pained me to see such a noble, gentle woman, one who had dedicated her life to caring for others, suffering so much. I found myself questioning the cruel twists of fate that had befallen her, wondering how someone so good could endure so much injustice and heartache. Every time I looked into her eyes, filled with both the memories of lost dreams and the resilience of a survivor, my own heart sank under the weight of her suffering. Still, amid all the despair and betrayal, there remained a small ember of hope, a hope that perhaps this transient world was but a temporary abode. I tried to console myself by reminding both Madame and myself that life in this world is fleeting. One day, we would all depart from this temporary dwelling, and perhaps in the hereafter, God would bestow upon her a reward far greater than any she could have imagined in this life. In reflecting on these events, I could not help but see a complex tapestry of love, betrayal, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Madame's tragic ordeal was not simply a series of unfortunate events. It was a profound lesson in the impermanence of worldly attachments and the resilience required to face life's cruelties. Even as Salmon's dark deeds had disrupted her life, Madame had chosen to embrace a future in which she dedicated herself to a greater good, one that extended beyond personal vendettas and the narrow confines of social reputation. Her decision to devote her property to the benefit of impoverished children was, in a way, a testament to her indomitable spirit. Despite having suffered immense personal loss and betrayal, she still found the strength to help those who were less fortunate, a quality that many in our community admired, even if they did not fully understand the depths of her sorrow. Her transformation from a woman who once dreamed of maternal joy into one who channeled her energies into charity was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Meanwhile, my own journey had taken an unexpected turn. The very same household that had once been a stage for painful secrets and betrayals had gradually transformed into a haven of relative peace. My husband's steadfast presence, combined with Madame's slowly healing heart, allowed us to build a life that was free from the constant shadows of the past. Yet even in these moments of calm, the memories of Salmon's misdeeds and the pain they had inflicted lingered like a dark specter, a reminder that sometimes the sins of the past can echo loudly into the present. There were days when I would catch myself reflecting on the irony of fate. How had a man who had once seemed so pure in Madame's eyes become the instrument of her sorrow? How could Salmon, who had been nurtured with such care and affection, descend into a life of debauchery and moral decay? These questions haunted me, leaving me with a sense of unease and a persistent sadness that I could neither shake off nor fully comprehend. Perhaps it was the harsh realities of life, the interplay between love and betrayal, duty and desire that had conspired to bring about this tragedy. Yet amid the heartbreak, I also saw glimmers of redemption. Madame's unwavering determination to reclaim her dignity, her willingness to stand up against the wrongs inflicted upon her, and her eventual decision to channel her grief into acts of charity all spoke of a woman who, despite everything, refused to be defined solely by her misfortunes. As I write these words, I'm reminded that our world is nothing more than a transient dwelling, a temporary abode where we are all destined to pass through. The trials and tribulations that we endure in this life may leave deep scars, but they are also the crucible in which our true character is forged. Madame's story, filled with betrayal, sorrow, and unexpected acts of kindness, is a poignant reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is the possibility of renewal and hope. In the end, I have come to believe that every hardship, every painful memory, and every tear shed in despair carries within it the seed of a future reward. A promise that, in the hereafter, our suffering will be recompensed in ways that far surpass the fleeting gratifications of this world. Marred by personal loss and social stigma, may well have been a test of her endurance and faith. And as I look at her now, quietly resilient, still caring for those around her, and ever hopeful of a better future, I cannot help but feel that perhaps there is a divine plan at work, one that will ultimately reward her boundless kindness and unwavering strength. Thus, even as I continue to grapple with the bitter memories of Salmon's betrayals and the painful lessons learned from this turbulent chapter of our lives, I choose to hold on to the belief that love, dignity, and compassion will ultimately prevail. In a world where nothing lasts forever and where every moment is but a fleeting shadow, It is the enduring human spirit that carries us forward, transforming even the deepest wounds into sources of light for ourselves and for those who come after us. And so, as we move forward in this uncertain life, I carry with me the memory of Madamin's trials, not as a tale of despair, but as a testament to the strength of a kind soul who, despite all odds, managed to turn her pain into a beacon of hope. Her journey reminds me that while the physical world may be transient, the legacy of compassion, resilience, and selfless love endures, lighting the way for a brighter tomorrow. In the end, it is this timeless truth that I hold dear, that our lives are a series of lessons, each hardship preparing us for a reward far greater than we could ever imagine. And as I continue to navigate the complexities of my own existence, I do so with the quiet conviction that, just as Madame has shown, the greatest triumph can come from the most profound struggles, a triumph of the human spirit that will shine brightly in the life to come.